My name is Ethan Roberts, and I'm 29 years old. Up until last Saturday, I thought I had my life all figured out. I was engaged to Emily, a woman I had been with for 6 years. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I thought we were solid. I had built my life around her and her family, always trying to fit into their world. I thought when the time came, I would finally be accepted into the family. But everything changed that evening. At dinner, of all places, Emily and I arrived at her parents' home, which was tucked away in the upscale neighborhood of Green Hills. The house was the kind of place you only saw in magazines, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that screamed money. Thomas, her father, was a successful real estate developer, and Caroline, her mother, was always involved in the latest high society charity event or gala. They were everything I wasn't, and I had long since learned to bite my tongue when it came to their family dynamic. Emily's younger brother, Ben, had just turned 30, and he worked as a financial analyst at a top firm. He was your typical well-dressed, well-spoken guy, smart, polished, and always ready to throw around terms like market trends and portfolio diversification. His girlfriend, Olivia, was 27, a marketing consultant who constantly seemed like she was auditioning for some picture-perfect role in a glossy ad. She had that look about her, the kind of polished perfection that most people could only dream of achieving. That Saturday evening was no different from the others. We sat down to dinner, and the conversation was the same routine. Thomas discussing his latest property investments, Caroline talking about the upcoming charity gala she was organizing, and Ben bragging about his recent deal at work. It was the usual family dinner where the important topics of conversation were only for people with money and influence. Nobody ever asked me much about myself, unless it was to give a polite answer to whatever they needed. I had learned over the years that my accomplishments never seemed to matter, not as much as their stories did. The moment they learned about my digital marketing business, it was as if they filed it away in the small time category, not worth their time to explore or take seriously. Then Olivia spoke up. "So, Ethan, I heard you run your own business?" she asked, her voice carrying that faux interest tone, the one you use when you're not really curious, but just filling space in a conversation. She was sitting across from me, holding her wine glass with a perfect grip, like it was some kind of prop to enhance her image. I nodded, trying to remain calm. "Yes, I run a digital marketing consultancy. We help small businesses build their online presence and grow their brand awareness." Olivia's eyes narrowed slightly, like she was trying to decide if I was telling the truth or just throwing out buzzwords. "Sounds interesting. But that's more like freelance work, right?" she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The way she phrased it annoyed me, but I kept my composure. "It's a full-service agency. We've worked with several mid-sized companies, helping them with everything from SEO to social media campaigns. It's more involved than freelance work. We focus on growing businesses in a personalized way, not just running generic ads." She raised an eyebrow, looking almost disappointed that I wasn't playing along with the narrative she had in her mind. "Oh, right. I guess I just thought it was more like social media management. You know, the kind of thing people do while sitting in their pajamas?" A laugh escaped from Ben's direction, and I could feel my face tighten. But I wasn't going to let her get away with this. It's more complex than that. We provide tailored strategies aimed at growing a brand's reach and sales. It's not just posting pictures on Instagram or writing tweets. It's about creating real, sustainable growth for our clients. The table went silent. I could feel the weight of their gaze, but nobody spoke up. The only sound was the clink of silverware against plates. Caroline exchanged a glance with Thomas, who gave a tight smile and nodded, clearly uninterested. Ben, always looking for an opportunity to make a joke at my expense, continued to casually glance between Olivia and me. Then Olivia leaned in a little closer, her smirk widening as she spoke again. "So, how long have you been in this business? Must be tough to find real clients, huh? I mean, I'm sure your website looks good, but do you even have a portfolio with big names?" It was at that moment, right in the pit of my stomach, that I felt the heat rise. I could feel my pulse quicken as I looked at her, the woman who'd never truly taken me seriously. I work with clients across several industries, I said, keeping my voice even. We've had significant success with companies in tech, retail, and healthcare. We don't need big names to prove our worth. She chuckled under her breath. Oh, I'm sure, she said, her voice laced with sarcasm. But real marketing firms don't focus on small clients, right? They work with bigger brands. You know, the kind that can actually afford high-end services. The condescension in her tone was so sharp, I could feel my patience snap. My hands clenched at my sides. She had crossed the line. Olivia, I said, keeping my voice low but firm, I think you're mistaken about my business, and frankly, I don't appreciate the way you're talking about it. Oh? She replied, an eyebrow arched. Am I being too harsh? I just thought it was cute that you were trying so hard to make it sound like a real business. The room froze, and I knew in that moment I wasn't going to let this go. The room was thick with silence. Everyone was staring at me, and I could feel the weight of their gaze. I knew this was the moment. The moment I either shut up and let this pass like I always had, or I finally said something that made them understand just who I was. I wasn't going to sit there any longer and take their disrespect. I set my fork down and looked straight at Olivia. You want to know what's cute, Olivia? I said, keeping my voice steady but cold. What's cute is how you've spent the last 10 minutes mocking my business, acting like you know anything about it when you don't. And you do it in front of people who are supposed to care about me. So, let me make one thing perfectly clear. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I run a business. Roberts Digital made $2.5 million last year in revenue. And I've done that by working with small and mid-sized companies who know the value of quality work. We don't need to work with big names to prove we're worth something. And by the way, the clients we work with are the ones who appreciate the work we do for them, not just the ones looking for a cheap, quick fix that only works for a month. I saw the shift in Olivia's expression. Her smile wavered. She hadn't expected this. None of them had. I pulled my phone out and set it on the table, sliding it over to her. You want proof? I continued. Here's an email thread with a client who signed a 6-figure contract with us last month. Here's our financials from last quarter. I'm not here to play games, Olivia. I'm here to make money, grow a business, and build something real. So if you can't respect that, maybe you should keep your opinions to yourself. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Olivia was staring at the phone, her face pale. I knew I had her, and the rest of the table wasn't much better. Ben was avoiding eye contact, clearly uncomfortable now, while Caroline was blinking rapidly, like she didn't know how to respond. Thomas, as usual, had that tight smile on his face, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. I wasn't sure if it was guilt or anger, probably both. You see, the problem with all of you, I said, my voice quieter now but still firm, is that you think success only looks one way. You think it's all about the glossy headlines, the Fortune 500 companies, the ones who can throw money at any problem and expect results. But real success? It's about creating something from the ground up. It's about the work, the hustle, and the people who believe in what you do. I turned to look at Ben, who was sitting there with his arms crossed, clearly trying to downplay the tension. Ben, I don't need you to chime in and tell me I'm making this worse. You've spent your whole life in the comfort of a family that can fix any problem with money, and you wouldn't know hard work if it hit you in the face. Maybe you should take a moment and actually listen to someone who built something from scratch, instead of assuming everything was handed to me. Caroline finally spoke, her voice cool but cutting. Ethan, you're making a scene. This is unnecessary. Olivia didn't mean anything by it. You're overreacting. I looked at her, incredulous. Overreacting? Caroline, for years, I've sat here, listened to you all talk down to me, brush aside my accomplishments like they don't matter. And now when I finally stand up for myself, I'm the one who's overreacting? No. This ends tonight. The room had gone completely still. I could feel the air thick with tension, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for someone to speak. But nobody did. And that was when I realized I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. I had been trying so hard for so long to fit into their world, to earn their respect, but it had never been about me. It had always been about them and their expectations. It was time to stop pretending. I turned back to Emily, who had been silent the entire time. Her eyes were red, and I could see the tears threatening to spill over. "Emily," I said softly, "I'm done. I can't keep pretending that this is okay. I can't keep allowing this family to treat me like I'm less than I am. And I can't keep pretending like you're ever going to stand up for me. You haven't said a word. Not once." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She just looked at me with a mixture of guilt and confusion, as though she didn't understand what was happening. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about her family. It was about her too. She had never really stood by me, not in the way I needed. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady now. "You can stay here if you want, but I'm done. I can't be in a relationship where I'm constantly made to feel like I'm not good enough, not even for you." I stood up and grabbed my coat, walking toward the door without looking back. I didn't know if Emily would follow, but I wasn't waiting around to find out. I couldn't stay in a place where I was constantly diminished, not by her, not by her family, and not by anyone else. This was my life, and it was time I started living it for myself. The days following the dinner were a blur, but in a way, they also felt like the clearest I'd ever had. I spent the next week wrestling with the emotions of the whole situation: anger, frustration, hurt, but also, for the first time, relief. I wasn't angry with Emily for not following me out of her parents' house that night. I knew she was stuck in a place between loyalty to me and loyalty to her family, and I couldn't fault her for that. But I was done pretending. I couldn't live a life where I constantly bent myself to meet their expectations and still never got the respect I deserved. I didn't hear from Emily the next few days. At first, I thought maybe she was just processing everything. But by the time a week had passed, I knew she wasn't coming. She wasn't going to fight for me, not in the way I needed. I couldn't blame her, not completely. She was raised in a family that made everything feel conditional. If you weren't one of them, you weren't worth their time. I had always known it in the back of my mind, but it became undeniable after the dinner. The way she had stayed silent, the way she let her family treat me as if I didn't matter, it cut deeper than I cared to admit. I poured myself into work. It felt like the only thing I could control, the only thing that mattered. Roberts Digital had been doing well, but I knew it had the potential to do better. The way I had been treated by Emily's family wasn't just a personal blow. It was a wake-up call. I wasn't going to waste another minute trying to fit into a world that didn't want me. I started networking more aggressively, reaching out to potential clients who saw the value in my work, not just the size of my company. I began refining my team, bringing in people who shared my vision for success, people who weren't looking for shortcuts, but who were willing to put in the work. It didn't take long before things started moving. A few months after the dinner, we secured a contract with a national retail chain that was projected to bring in over $2 million in revenue over the next year. It was a game changer for us. The deal came through because I'd stopped second-guessing myself, stopped worrying about fitting into the expectations of the people who'd always dismissed me. My confidence grew as my business did, and with every new deal, I felt a little more like the person I was meant to be, someone who built his success on his own terms. During that time, I moved into a new apartment, not far from the hustle and bustle of the city, but far enough away from the memories of the life I had been trying to build with Emily. I chose it because it felt like a fresh start, a new chapter where I could make my own rules, live my own life. The place was small but comfortable, with big windows that let in plenty of sunlight and a view of the skyline that reminded me that the world was bigger than what I'd known in Green Hills. A few months passed, and one evening, I found myself having dinner at a restaurant with a potential client, someone I had been courting for a while. The atmosphere was calm, the kind of place that would have been perfect for a quiet family dinner, had it been with the right people. As I was discussing our services, I caught sight of a familiar face across the room. It was Thomas and Caroline Patterson, sitting at a table not far from mine. They hadn't seen me yet, but I could feel them staring in my direction. The recognition in Thomas's eyes was unmistakable. I wasn't the same guy they dismissed at their dinner table months ago. I wasn't the kid from the wrong side of Tattatown anymore. I didn't look away. Instead, I watched them from across the room, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to shrink. I didn't feel the need to be anything other than who I was. I wasn't here to impress them, to make them see my worth. I knew it now. I had nothing to prove to them. And as the thought settled in, something in me shifted. I wasn't going to waste my energy worrying about how they saw me anymore. I was done trying to fit into their world. As I finished my dinner, I noticed Thomas glance over again, probably trying to figure out who I was with. He looked like he might come over to speak to me, but then he saw the man sitting across from me, my potential client, a successful investor in the tech industry. Thomas paused, his face tightening when he realized who I was with. That was when I understood. They thought I had just gotten lucky, but they didn't know about the connections I had built, the clients I had secured, the people who believed in me. I stood up to leave, and as I passed by their table, I glanced at Thomas and Caroline. "Good evening," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Enjoy your meal." They both froze, unsure of how to respond. Thomas's jaw clenched, and Caroline looked away. I smiled, not maliciously, but with the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had done it on my own. I didn't need their approval. I was living the life I'd built, and that was more than enough. It wasn't just about the money or the clients. It was about proving to myself that I could do this, that I was capable of building something real. And as I walked out of the restaurant, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing for years. I wasn't defined by where I came from or who I was supposed to be. I was defined by what I had created, and that, I realized, was more than enough. A few years passed since I walked out of that dinner, and life had changed in ways I hadn't anticipated. Roberts Digital had grown beyond what I thought possible. The initial feeling of liberation, that sense of finally being free from the expectations of Emily's family, had evolved into something deeper. Success, at least on my own terms, had become a habit. Every day, I woke up to a company that I had built from the ground up, surrounded by a team who believed in what we were doing. It wasn't just about the deals or the money. It was about creating something that was mine, something I could be proud of. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had a clear vision for the future. But even with all the progress, there were moments when the past still lingered in the background, like an old nagging thought that I couldn't shake. I had moved on, but every now and then, I'd find myself thinking about Emily, wondering if she was okay, what her life looked like now, and whether she had found a way to reconcile with the choices I had made. Those thoughts never stayed long, but they were there, lingering, waiting for moments when I felt vulnerable. One afternoon, as I was wrapping up a meeting in my office, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number, and the name attached was one I hadn't seen in years. Emily. I stared at the screen for a long moment before opening the message. "Ethan, I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, and I realized I never gave you the chance to explain. I know things ended badly, and I hurt you. I'm sorry for that. I've missed you. Can we talk?" My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't sure what I had expected, but it wasn't this. After everything, after the silence, the distance, I had assumed I would never hear from her again. I wasn't even sure I was ready to hear from her. But the truth was, I'd always wondered what would have happened if things had been different, if she had stood up for me the way I needed her to. I didn't respond right away. I sat there, feeling the weight of everything we had been through. I had spent years building my life without her, and in doing so, I had built a version of myself that I was proud of. But there was a part of me that still wondered about the what-ifs of our past. If she had stood by me, if things had gone differently, would we have been able to make it work? Or had I been right to walk away? After a few hours of pondering, I finally typed out a response. "I appreciate your message, Emily. I've had a lot of time to think about everything, too. But the truth is, I'm not the same person I was when we were together. I'm not sure what talking would do for us now. I hope you understand that this is about me finding peace with my life, and that includes walking away from what wasn't working. I've built a life I'm proud of, and I need to honor that." It wasn't a message filled with anger or resentment, but it was firm. I had no intention of reopening that chapter of my life, not without understanding what had changed and whether there was anything left to salvage. The response came quickly, a single line that seemed to hang in the air long after I had read it. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry." And with that, the conversation ended. There was no need for anything more. She was still the same person who couldn't give me what I needed, and I was still the same person who had to walk away to find my worth. But in that brief exchange, I had closure. A few days later, I ran into her at a networking event, of all places. She was standing across the room, talking to a group of people, but the moment our eyes met, she froze. It was only for a second, but it felt like time had stopped. Neither of us moved. Neither of us said anything. I didn't walk over, and she didn't come to me. Instead, I turned and walked away, knowing I didn't need to say the things I thought I would. I didn't need to confront her or try to make sense of the past. What I had built, what I had become, was enough. Walking out of the event that night, I realized something I hadn't understood before. I had finally let go of the past. I wasn't holding on to the anger or the hurt anymore. I wasn't holding on to the idea that my worth depended on someone else's approval. I had built a life that was mine, and that was all that mattered. In the end, I realized that the most important thing I had learned over the past few years was how to stand on my own 2 feet, how to build something meaningful without needing anyone's validation. It wasn't about making them see my worth, it was about finally seeing it for myself. And that, I realized, was all I ever needed. A year passed since I had that brief exchange with Emily at the networking event, and while I'd mostly moved on, the lessons from that period of my life still lingered. Running Roberts Digital had been both challenging and fulfilling. Every day, I pushed myself to be better, not for anyone else's approval, but because I had learned the hard way that my worth was something I had to define for myself. The company had expanded, we had moved into new markets, and the team had grown. I'd signed contracts that brought in multi-million-dollar revenue, and with each success, I could feel the weight of the past lifting further away. But there were moments, quiet ones, when I wasn't busy or distracted, that I found myself reflecting on the choices I'd made. Some days, it felt like everything I had gone through had been worth it. The confrontation at that dinner, the heartbreak, the decision to walk away from Emily, even the lonely nights where I wondered if I'd made the right call. All of it had led to this version of myself, someone who was finally at peace with who he was. I had my independence, my business, my life. But still, there were moments when the memories came rushing back. The way Emily had looked at me that night at her parents' house, the silence when I had walked out, the feeling of rejection that stayed with me for so long. Those moments came less frequently now, but when they did, I had learned to let them pass like a storm in the distance. One morning, I woke up to a message on my phone, one I hadn't expected to see. It was from Ben, Emily's brother. The last time we spoke had been at that disastrous dinner, and I'd never heard from him since. I wasn't sure what to make of the message at first. "Hey, Ethan, I know it's been a while, but I wanted to reach out. I've been thinking a lot about that night and about how things went down. I never really apologized for what happened, and I should have. I wasn't there for you, and I didn't have your back when it mattered. I regret that. I don't know if you'll even see this, but I wanted to tell you I'm sorry. Take care." For a moment, I just stared at the screen. I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I had never expected an apology from anyone in that family, let alone from Ben, who had always played the role of the favored one, the one who could do no wrong. But there it was, his message, raw and honest in a way I hadn't thought him capable of. Part of me felt the old instinct to brush it off, to not engage with the past. But another part of me, the part that had grown through all of this, knew that maybe it was time to acknowledge the apology. It wasn't about forgiving him. It was about letting go of the last shred of bitterness I had held on to. So I decided to reply, "Ben, I appreciate your message. It's been a long time, and a lot has changed. I'm not sure if we'll ever be able to go back to the way things were, but I respect the fact that you reached out. I've built something of my own since then, and I've learned a lot about who I am in the process. I hope you're doing well." I hit send, not expecting anything in return. It wasn't a resolution or a reopening of old wounds. It was just me acknowledging that part of my past and then letting it go. Later that week, I was in the middle of a client presentation when I saw the notification on my phone. It was another message, this time from Emily. I hadn't heard from her in months, and I didn't know what to expect. I debated whether or not to open it, but figured it was better to know than to wonder. I wasn't the same person who had been blindsided by her years ago. I had built my life without her, and I had accepted that reality. Ethan, I hope you're doing well. I've been thinking a lot about you and wanted to apologize for everything. I know I didn't stand by you when I should have, and I'm sorry for that. I never gave you the respect you deserved. I've changed a lot since then, and I've realized how much I hurt you. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I read the message through twice, and for the first time, I felt a shift within myself. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even sad. I was indifferent. I had spent so much of my life searching for answers, for validation, for closure, and now I had them all on my own terms. I wasn't going to talk to her. I wasn't going to hear her say things I already knew. I wasn't going to make her take back what she had done. I had moved on. I responded briefly. Thank you for reaching out, Emily. I've moved forward, and I've built something for myself. I don't know what more there is to say, but I hope you find what you're looking for. I closed the conversation and put my phone down. It wasn't about bitterness or closure anymore. It was about the peace I had found in my own life. Emily had apologized, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to hold on to the past. I was ready to move forward, not just from the pain of that relationship, but from the past itself. The sun was setting outside my office window, casting a warm golden glow over the city. For the first time in a long while, I realized that I was exactly where I needed to be. I wasn't the person I used to be, and I didn't have to answer to anyone else's expectations. I had built a life that was mine, and for the first time, I was truly content with it. It's funny how time can change your perspective. At some point, it feels like you're stuck in this perpetual cycle of growth, where the next milestone is always just out of reach. But once you've reached a certain place, you realize that the journey you've been on, the steps you've taken to get here, are just as important as the destination itself. That realization came to me gradually as I sat in my new office, looking out at the city skyline. The view was a reminder of how far I'd come, but more than that, it was a reflection of how much I had learned along the way. After the messages from Emily and Ben, I had settled into a quiet sort of peace. I didn't need any more validation from them or anyone else. I had done the work. I had built Roberts Digital from the ground up, and I had created a life that was mine. But even with all the professional success, there was still something missing. A sense of connection, something I hadn't realized I was missing until recently. The truth was, I had poured so much into my business that I hadn't made much time for anything else. Sure, I had the team, the clients, the success, but I had neglected relationships, friendships, and deeper connections along the way. One evening, a few months after Emily's message, I found myself sitting alone at a bar, nursing a glass of whiskey and scrolling through my phone. It wasn't exactly a thrilling Friday night, but I didn't mind the solitude. As I was about to put my phone down, a notification from my social media app popped up, an invitation to an event for entrepreneurs in the city. I had received invites like this before, but this time, something about it felt different. Maybe it was the fact that I had finally reached a place where I could consider expanding my personal network, or maybe it was just the simple desire for something beyond work. Whatever it was, I decided to go. The event was at a local gallery downtown, chic, sleek, and just the kind of place I had never paid much attention to before. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew that stepping into a room full of strangers would be a bit outside my comfort zone. But I had grown used to doing things that pushed me to grow, and I figured a few hours of mingling couldn't hurt. When I arrived, I walked into the gallery and immediately felt a wave of unfamiliarity wash over me. The crowd was filled with professionals, artists, and entrepreneurs, all engaged in deep conversations, networking, exchanging ideas. It was strange. The atmosphere was different from anything I had experienced before. I wasn't used to these types of events, where connections weren't just about business deals. They were about shared interests, values, and stories. As I moved through the crowd, a woman caught my eye. She was standing by a painting, discussing its symbolism with a small group. Something about her presence was magnetic, the way she spoke with such passion about her work, how her eyes lit up when she talked about the things that mattered to her. Her name was Grace, and we hit it off instantly. We spoke for nearly an hour about our different professional journeys, our struggles, and the things that inspired us. I found myself opening up more than I usually did, about my business, my personal growth, and the things I had learned along the way. It was refreshing to talk to someone who wasn't interested in my numbers or my achievements, but was genuinely curious about the person behind the business. By the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers and promised to meet again soon. As I left the event, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: hope. Hope that there was more to life than just success in business. That maybe, for the first time in years, I could allow myself to build meaningful relationships, to connect with people who saw me as more than just a business owner. Maybe there was room in my life for something deeper than just professional growth. Over the next few months, Grace and I started spending more time together, and I found myself enjoying her company more than I had anticipated. She was different from anyone I had dated before. She was independent, driven, and thoughtful, but she also had a lightness about her that made it easy to be around her. We shared experiences, stories, and laughter, and for the first time, I felt like I was truly connecting with someone, not just because of who I was or what I had accomplished, but because of who I was at my core. At the same time, I began reaching out to other people, friends from the past, colleagues, people who had been part of my journey, but whom I had let slip away. It was like I was building something new, not just a business, but a life full of connections, growth, and people who mattered to me. And in that process, I realized something important. The success I had built with Roberts Digital was incredible, but it wasn't everything. The relationships, the experiences, the ability to connect on a human level, that was what truly made life worth living. For the first time, I wasn't just looking forward to the next big deal, the next milestone. I was looking forward to a future where I wasn't just defined by what I did, but by who I was becoming. And for the first time, I felt at peace with that. Life isn't just about achieving success or meeting others' expectations. It's about knowing your own worth and staying true to yourself. Don't let anyone make you feel small or unworthy because of where you come from or how they perceive you. Embrace your journey, even the painful parts, because they shape who you are. Build a life that reflects your values, not the ones imposed by others. Surround yourself with people who support and respect you, and never be afraid to walk away from toxic relationships. Remember, the most important approval you need is your own.